All right, here we are. Hi, everybody. All right. So, get everybody working on making their way in. I know Jiro was saying that they were going to be here, so that's exciting. So Courtney, how are you?
I am good. I am good. It's been one of them long days.
Oh yeah,
I
I
worked
feel
12
you.
hour shifts. So I just got out.
Yeah, I did not have a 12-hour shift, but I did work today, so I feel
Don't
you.
you love working on a weekend?
Yeah. Technically my weekends are Sunday, Monday, so
Not too bad.
yeah. Hi, Scarlett. Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
All right, we'll let some time go through so everybody can come in and say hello. I am so excited for this. Y'all have no idea. Oh,
Been a
I'm
long
excited.
time coming for
Yes,
me reading
yes.
this
I feel
book.
like I've been talking about this for months, and I'm so glad that I can finally do this. Oh, all right. Well, for those of you that do not know, my name is Gabby. I go by the moniker of the Curious Owl. This is my channel where I talk about bookish things if you are new. And with me here, I have Courtney from Tangible Reads, who is not only a friend of mine, but also is, going to be my co-host for this live show. I mean, I see maybe if you want to come join in on the rest of them, totally up to you. But I would love to also include other people as well. If you guys ever want to come hang out on these live shows with me, just let me know. Hi, Pat. Hello, hello.
Hey, Pat.
My favorite vampy. Um, so today we are going to be going over and talking about the fifth season. Lachette. Oh, okay, cool. Thank you for letting me know that. Lachette. I'll have to try to remember that. Good to know. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the fifth season by N.K. Jemisin today. For those of you that don't know or are just kind of popping on for the first time, I am hosting a read along over the course of 2023 where I am reading all of N.K. Jemisin's work, and you guys are hopefully going to come along the ride with me. This past month in January, we all read the fifth season, which is the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy. It is N.K. Jemisin's most popular series to date, being a series that has had all three books win the Hugo Awards 3 years in a row. It is insane. This series is like one of the most popular fantasy series of all time. And I think for a lot of reasons, rightly so. This is especially being written by a person of color is incredibly, incredibly awesome to see them win so many amazing awards for this series. So we're going to talk a little bit about the book itself and just kind of some of the themes and talking a little bit about some theories that we might have going on for those of you that are going to be joining in at least at the very least, the series itself, whether or not you continue with the rest of the read along, just because we're going to be going over a lot of different things. So the first thing I wanted to do was just kind of go touch on the main synopsis that there is on Goodreads of the fifth season, if you just need a quick refresher of kind of the idea of the story. So the synopsis that we have on Goodreads goes, this is the way the world ends. Again, 3 terrible things happen in a single day. As soon, a woman living an ordinary life in a small town comes home to find that her husband has brutally murdered their son and kidnapped their daughter. Meanwhile, mighty Sai, I'm just going to call them Sai because that's how I think of them. The world spanning, oh, no, wait. My apologies. Meanwhile, mighty Sans, the world spanning empire whose innovations have been civilization's bedrock for 1,000 years, collapses as most of its citizens are murdered to serve a madman's vengeance. And worst of all, across the heart of the vast continent known as the Stillness, a great red rift has been torn into the heart of the earth, spewing ash enough to darken the sky for years or centuries. This is really the main synopsis for one particular character. Now Essie must pursue the wreckage of her family through a deadly, dying land. Without sunlight, clean water, or arable land, and with limited stockpiles of supplies, There will be war all across the stillness, a battle royale of nations, not for power or territory, but simply for the basic resources necessary to get through the long, dark night. Essun does not care if the world falls apart around her. She'll break it herself if she must to save her daughter. So that's one particular synopsis in terms of it being involving the book. Because in the book, there's three perspectives that we see. And if you've read the book, you will know that at the end, there is a huge reveal, which we will talk about later. So keep in mind, for those of you that are coming on, just hopping on to say hi, this is going to be a spoiler-filled live show. We are going to talk in depth about some of the things that are brought up in the book as far as plot points, characters, things like that. So if you have not read the fifth season, I would highly suggest not really tuning into this, only because I don't want to spoil the book for you if you are interested in reading it. And I think with that disclosure out of the way, let's get into it. So, Courtney, let's talk a little bit about ideas. You had posted your own review video here yesterday, I believe, actually, going into your thoughts of it. So please feel free to share your thoughts for those of you that did, for those that did not see that video of yours.
Well, I got my tea, since we're going to talk about the tea. Just to let y'all know. I thought that it was good. Like, when I first started it, I just was like, you go in with N.K. Jemisin because everybody talks about it. So I'm already kind of hyped up initially. Mm-hmm. And I felt that it was just important. Like from the first chapter, I was like, there's some very important themes going on here. So I just was kind of hyped about that. And then, I kept trying to figure out where the characters intersect. Overall, I was interested, and I know I posted online that I'm, don't know if I am going to read the other book, but I am. And I got them already anyway. But I was I felt like the magic, like the earth magic kind of, I would say that part didn't interest me as much because I'm more of like action. So kind of putting the energy into the earth, while I thought it was interesting, it kind of threw me off a bit. But overall, I liked the stories. I thought the characters were unique and interesting. There was like a bunch of funny parts. And overall, I did enjoy the story.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's get into some of the things that are involved with the book. One of the most important things that I want to discuss specifically is the fact that N.K. Jemisin has a very unique style in terms of writing this, in terms of the perspectives, and then also the voice of one of those perspectives. Namely, if you have read the book, you would know that basically there's three main perspectives we have in this. We have Essun that was talked about in the synopsis that I read. That was just one of the ones that was on Goodreads. There is Cyanite, and then there is Demaya. Now, in particular, one of these perspectives has a second person, like second voice, basically saying you a lot, as if the reader is actually the character, and that is for Essun. So this is very different than how I've ever seen fantasy done in the past, or any book in general. It is very, very rare that we see authors that write with any kind of second person perspective. So I kind of wanted to talk with everybody about maybe a little bit about in terms of like how that was for people, because I know it was very odd for me at first, but it kind of then just became almost as if I was actually reading third person as opposed to second. I just kind of got used to it. What did you think, Courtney?
That was something that threw me off because I have only read, this is only the second time I've ever read something in second person. So at least I recognized that was second person, because the first time I was like, what the heck is that? But I thought that was interesting because I felt like they were talking like to us. So I thought that I think it gave you more of a personal investment more into that character, a little bit more than maybe the others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I think that especially considering the things that we learn later, having the more present kind of character, like the one that you would be seeing more from as if it was you, being Essun was an incredibly interesting choice. And I'm curious as to why, like, what would be some thoughts as to why that was done the way it was? Why was it that we saw Essun as a second person voice as opposed to one of the others, if not the other characters that were in the story? Why was it that Esun was the one that was so different in terms of the style of the writing? I honestly think that maybe it's because we are supposed to view it as some kind of a thing where essentially, like, yes, Esun is the present, and when you learn what the other characters really are, that's the backtracking. And so now looking in the present, it's like you get then a much more personal, much more intimate look at the person as they are in that current time.
I thought the same thing because I was thinking is the fact that like ultimately since all of the characters become her, like
Mm-hmm.
both Demaya and Cyan, I figured that because she's the most pivotal character, I'm assuming that the book follows like her since
Mm-hmm.
everybody culminated into Esun.
Yeah, I would think so too. I would not be surprised if Esun is the one that, like, if in the other books we stop with the backtracking so much. I wouldn't be surprised though too if we learn more about some of the things that led up to ultimately the person that became Esun, because I don't think we've gotten the whole story. I think that we've only touched really the surface of a lot of things, because what's interesting to me is that it seems like with both Demaya and Cyanide, which are basically also Esun, you've read the book, you'll know that Demaya, Esun, and Cyanide are all the same person in different times of their life. Demaya is a very young girl who just really starts becoming the origin that she is, learning her powers, wanting to become that, and then being sent off to essentially this fulcrum school where she's able to hone her powers. Cyanide is kind of that adolescent, young adult kind of time frame where she's really kind of gotten into her power, but she's starting to kind of make her way in the world through becoming a breeder of sorts for a very powerful origin. And then you have Esun, who is a much more adult time frame, which we would consider more, I guess, in a sense, present tense. And we're kind of backtracking as we go. I just find it really interesting that Esun is where we get that new intimate perspective, because I think it is that present tense, and we're looking at everything from the past leading up to now and then going further. That's why maybe it's so differentiated in terms of uh, the tense, in terms of like second person, first person, third person, that kind of thing. So one other thing I wanted to talk about is why exactly is it these three things? And I want to open this up for a discussion. What is it about each of these individual parts of the same person that was so involved that we had to see these very particular instances? Is it because they were super traumatic things that happened to them in those time frames? Is it because they, I want to hear everyone's thoughts on that. Like, how is it that we got these three specific points in this character's life, as opposed to maybe three different characters in the same world?
I think it follows, like, as far as we're following one character, I feel like it was much better. I mean, we have all these other residual characters too, and I don't know how much more of a like in-depth you'll get to each of them compared to what we already have. But I do like the idea of following this one character to determine this is where she ultimately ended up. It's like different stages of your life, almost kind of like a coming of age story, although it's not, exactly that. But in a way it is, because she is a different person in each life, essentially. So I think it's to see, how did you get to this person? How did she get to have her different view? And so if you had different characters, I think you don't get that in-depth investment into one character and into an origin and figuring out exactly what that is and how much of a pivotal role that is in the whole fracturing of the earth or putting it back together. And I guess it depends on ultimately what happens.
Right. I love that, actually. The understanding that the reason why you couldn't do it with three characters is because it's so fractured. Every single part of this world is fracturing, and you see it not just with the character herself fracturing in a sense where she comes up with all of these different personalities in a sense, not really necessarily personalities, but identity changes over the course of time. But then as you're seeing each of the characters or each of the points of her life, you're seeing the world fracture in very different ways, either for her personally with her relationships or what's going on actually in the real world, politically, environmentally, economically, anything like that. And I love this too, Lachette, how life changes you, since literally the present tense is as soon or you. And I think that is absolutely wonderful. And that she controls the birth and the death of the world around her. Yes, 100%. I understand that. What I find also interesting is the fact that when it comes to Essun in particular, when we learn about, when first opening of her entire scene, we learn that her son's been killed by her husband, which by itself is an incredibly traumatic thing. Any person that has a child, I feel for them, because I don't know necessarily what it's like to have children because I don't have any of my own, but I do know what it feels to really lose something that is valuable to you, that is like, a child, whether it's, an actual child that you grew close to, or an animal, even if you consider animals to be almost like children in some case. I know losing that is incredibly hard, but in such a very violent manner. Do we think that became Essun's tipping point, or was there a tipping point at some other point within that? Because I feel like with each of the characters or points of her life, there's been a tipping point where it has had her change her identity. Do we think that in some way Essun has now reached that, or do we think that that tipping point happened a while ago and now we're kind of seeing everything after that?
I feel like she almost had a death of a child in each of her lives. Like even in Demaya, like she's the child, but her childhood pretty much disappeared when it was determined she was an origin. And then in the other life, in Cyan's life, she lost a child. And then in this other one. So I feel like everything's just a buildup for her. Because there's some sort of loss along the way in each. And it's not even, maybe not even just child. It's just in the life that she had too, because she was a child in school and then her life got turned upside down. And then when she was Cyan, she was in the fulcrum. She left that and then she couldn't go back. And then she created a whole new life. And then that imploded when the Guardians came. And then as soon, her husband, so I feel like she's just ticking time bomb, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if in book 2 we're going to see more of that ticking time bomb happen, because what else can possibly happen? And now especially that we've seen that Alabaster, who she thought was gone, is still alive. What does that do? How does that put a wrench in everything? Does it cause, are we going to see something happen to him that is going to send her over the edge again, or is going to send her over the edge entirely to where she's never going to come back from that? Like, I am very curious to see what exactly else happens, because it seems like this poor woman has gone through so much in her life already that I'm a little scared, honestly, to see what else is going to happen.
I feel like Alabaster's going to give her the tools to just cause hell.
That's entirely possible. He taught her a lot of things.
Yeah,
he taught her a lot when she was under the name of Cyanite. So Elysis thinks that she can control the obelisk, which I would be willing to bet there's going to be something brought up with that in book 2 as well. I mean, it's called the Obelisk Gate for a reason. So I think we're going to learn a lot more. What, like Courtney said, what she's capable of. Alabaster's going to give her the tools to really kick ass and take
Yes.
names.
I think he knows how to harness that energy. I feel like there's maybe some energy because she already feels some sort of pull and connection, and he is very cagey when it comes to information. So I feel like he's gonna give her the opportunity to learn what he knows because he seems like he's on the way out already.
Yeah. I feel like NK was letting us know we can become someone else, the ability to adjust to massive changes in our environment, situation, and survive. Yes, I love that.
Resiliency.
So good. Like that's such an amazing thing though too, and not just even in a more positive mindset, right? Like overcoming adversity, but for somebody that like Demaya, Cyanide, Esun, to go through that kind of trauma can cause lasting effects that make you in a negative way even have to change to survive, to be able to survive situations and environments. So it's kind of interesting to see how in some ways positively that's affected her, but it did affect her also in some negative ways. Because with Cyanide, it seemed like she was much more guarded. She didn't really seem to really trust too many people. And once she did, bad things happened again. And then the same thing happened as Essen. She let some people in. She started having a family, got really comfortable, and then everything falls apart. So it's interesting how there's been such kind of an up and down with her that we don't really know whether or not, again, if she's going to be a ticking time bomb, which I'm excited to see whether or not that blows up by the end of book 2.
Plus, she never got the chance to grieve her child because she had to fight for her life and leave. And she's also kind of saving her grief because she feels like she, is looking for her other child too. So at some point, if you don't grieve, things go to hell in a handbasket at some point. She has to grieve, but, where does that come into play?
Right. Well, and I wonder, does that have anything to do with the fact that she thinks because, like, as playing Mama Bear, right? Does she think that she doesn't have the time because she just has to focus on getting the kid as a mom, not because, she like actually can take that time? Because like I think of friends that are moms, right? They do everything for their kid. They do not take a break to take care of their kid or take care of themselves after taking care of the kid. It is everything to do with them. So is part of the reason she's going to be a ticking time bomb going to be because she's not letting some of that out? And if Alabaster comes into the fray, does he then also give her that opportunity to use her grief as part of her power or give her the space to take on that grief? I would be curious to know, because if he's as decent of a guy as he was at first, kind of with Cyanide, maybe that's possible. I don't know. It definitely is not over. That for sure.
Books is not over.
Yes. So then one other thing I want to talk about actually is about Alabaster perfectly. So which of y'all noticed that the main man in the very beginning, the prologue of the story, was Alabaster?
That's one of the things I wanted to go back and read the beginning, but I didn't go back and read the beginning after I ended it because I will say I was kind of confused. It took me a minute to kind of get into it and get my stride, but I didn't go back and look.
Yeah. So the reason I picked it out was because there was like one particular line, and I don't have the physical book with me right now. It's upstairs somewhere. But there was one line where basically, I believe it was Esun said something that there was a man who, like, that basically I think was Alabaster, who went through the whole thing of talking to people about, the 5th season. And it's interesting because when I first listened to the prologue, it sounded very much like what I would imagine the kind of Moses parting the Red Sea and bringing down the commandments kind of thing, like that. It had that big biblical vibe to me, which I wasn't surprised with, because that's a very popular thing with a lot of fantasy, is bringing in very biblical like images and very Christian-like kinds of things, because most writers, they're pulling from something they know. So maybe N.K. Jemisin has some biblical knowledge or research that, or even just looking at other fantasy stories pulled from that, right? I just thought it was interesting that we got to see almost a full circle moment from prologue to the very end. We get to see a scene that ties in with the actual breaking of the world, if you will.
You're talking about when it says he reaches up, reaches for power, takes all the strata and the magma and the people and the power, blah, 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 and then he breaks it.
Yeah, there was something
I
like
got
toward
that
the
too.
end where she mentions that like there was something, I can't remember what the exact line was, but there was something at the end that basically immediately sent me back to the prologue, because it was a very particular scene that I was like, that's exactly what happened in the prologue. That had to have been Alabaster.
Yes. I did pick that up, that he was the one that actually broke the world, and I guess it was him and the Stone Eater in the beginning talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I kept thinking throughout the book, who is that? Who is that? And then the end, I was like, oh.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see how cyclical that was, which again makes sense because this is a book that it talks about cyclical things, right? You have the world will end at some point. It's just a matter of who's going to do it and what exactly is going to happen. It's all going, like, everything has a rebirth and dying cycle. And I love that at the end of this one, we get to see, from the very, very beginning stages all the way to where this world ends, in a sense, or the beginning of the end happens. And we get to see how all of that kind of comes around in the first place. Because this is literal, like, probably going on like almost 30 years of time of this character's life. And we get to see at least parts of what has led up to that eventual breaking. It kind of like backtracks and then you go forward, which I really, really enjoyed myself. So, let's see. Yeah, I figured it out. I don't know if I like him or not. I get the icks from him. Alabaster sometimes gave me icks too, but I also appreciated the way that he was kind of like, I don't want to have sex with you, Cyanide. Like, that's just not right. And then it was, oh, wait. Yeah, then I probably should. And then I was like, I don't know. I'm still touch and go with him too, but I think that at the very least, like, there's going to be some good coming out of him in book 2, hopefully.
I think that he is probably jaded because he's a 10 ringer. If you're a 10 ringer, you've been through some stuff. Like, he's been at the mercy of the fulcrum, which basically just exploits the origins for their own gain. And he's just been doing that for however long. He's what, like 40? So let's say he went out when he was 20. I don't know, because he's a progeny. So he's been, a important person for quite a long period of time. So I think he's just overall jaded about a lot of stuff, and he has a lot more knowledge about just the corruption that's been going on. So I took, because at first I was like, I don't like this guy, but then I started taking that into account, especially when, what's his name? Oh my gosh. Homeboy at the Moevs, when that came into play, I just realized just how lonely and isolated that Alabaster was. So I started liking him a whole lot more then.
Yeah. It's kind of, I think it's definitely one of those things where like you just kind of unsure, but I'm excited to see how he fares in book 2, because I think that, just like you said, he's gonna bring out some stuff that I think will make a lot of people enjoy him as a character more, and maybe we'll learn more about him. Maybe we'll learn more about the actual relationship that there was between him and Cyanide through Essun, because obviously she remembers him. It's just she's kind of assumed a new identity at this point. Didn't realize it was him until the island was destroyed and his baby drowned. I understood why he would want to destroy the world. Yeah. Kind of going back to that, you hurt the baby, the bear's coming out kind of thing. And I really appreciated that. Don't know about biblical influences, but the geological and astronomical themes are so well done. I agree. I really like a lot of the magic building in terms of that, but I would agree with Courtney that there are some things that I wish would have been fleshed out a little bit more. I gave the book 5 stars because I loved it from beginning to end, but there were some things I do think could have been fleshed out a little bit more, helped made a little bit more clear in terms of like, the Stone Eaters, for instance. I feel like I didn't really get enough about them and understood them fully, but they were incredibly enjoyable in terms of just the overall like world building, kind of like how I felt with the Colas with Brandon Sanderson. Like I didn't understand everything about them, but I really, really liked it.
I feel like when it came to some of the biblical, and this isn't exactly, but I remember at the beginning when they were talking about like Father Earth, I guess Father Earth was upset because Mother Earth, I guess, had some horrible tragedy and died badly or whatever, and they didn't have kids, and they built the earth, and then people weren't taking care of it and destroying it and deforestation, all that stuff. So that to me, just, I don't know, for some reason that, and also the pulling from the, like you were talking about, kind of like Moses part in the Red Sea when he was pulling the power and fracture the earth. To me, all of that just screamed biblical to me as soon as I read it.
Yeah, and that's not to say that she pulled directly from the Bible, like I said. That it could be something that she'd seen in N.K. Jemisin has seen in other fantasy works, because fantasy does this thing a lot of times where it's pulling from biblical things because there's a type of magic that there is within parts of the Bible for a lot of people, and so it makes sense that you would have moments that are similar to very impactful moments in the Bible's story itself, of like Moses in the Red Sea and Jesus walking after being dead for 3 days, like that. There's things about that people in fantasy have drawn from for decades, and if not millennia, in any kind of story. So I just think that it's really interesting how it's so easy to see that with N.K. Jemisin, but at the same time, like it was done in a way that I think was so very different than what I've seen from other fantasy writers in the past. So I feel like Alabaster is always at the mercy of someone else. He may feel like he has nothing that is his, especially after the one child he hoped to actually raise was sacrificed. That killed me, though, on the inside, too, because I thought the exact same thing. Like, he wanted that kid so much. And then when he had to give it up because he knew what was going to happen to that baby and wanted to save it, that killed me on the inside. I felt for him so much because that was such a hard decision, I'm sure, to have to try to make. Like I can't even imagine putting myself in that position of like having to decide whether or not I would give up my kid to save them, whether it's giving them up maybe for adoption because I can't take care of them or whatever the case may be. Like it just hurts to know that like he had to go through so much with that, and not only him but then also cyanide. Like watching that happen was probably incredibly traumatic as well.
Also, the idea of the node maintainers. I mean, I don't know how many are his kids, but he said pretty much he's a powerful person. So that's an opportunity that they would use it just to know what happens to them, that they're just sitting there being utilized, hooked to machines. That's really sad that he actually had to see that. So I think that the baby, that when they actually went to the island, I think meant even more.
I think so too. Wish I got the connection between the three female characters sooner. I really enjoyed it after it came together. Feel like she wanted me to work and prove I deserve to read her book. I agree. I think that this was one of those books where it's like you have to be in this to get it. And I appreciate that because I love when I find out like those big plot twists. Like I remember when I first realized that the three of them were the same person, I was like, what? There's no way. And then thinking back on all of the characters, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense because it's really just three different time periods of this person's life. And it was just fascinating. I've never seen any author that has done that as well as she did. And I think that's probably why she got some of the awards that she did, because that was massive.
See, I got Demaya and Cyan were the same. Like, I'm like, oh, they're the same. And then it threw me for a loop that, it's Essun too.
Oh, okay. What was it about Cyan and Demaya that made you realize that they were the same?
Well, well, for one, they were both at the fulcrum, so that's that's an easy correlation for me there. But I just felt like Demaya was very much into following the rules because she already lost her family, and this is all she had left.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had Cyan, who was very ambitious and wanted to climb through the ranks and do her duty. So they were both just extremely loyal, even though they knew there was reservations about the Fulcrums and the Guardians. They just kind of had that same personality. So I figured one grew into the other.
Okay. Well, apparently you're not the only one that thought that, because Elysium also thought Cyanite and Demaya were the same. I just knew the U was so important too. I was like, what the heck is going on? Yes, 100%. As soon as I saw that U stuff, I was like, okay, hold on a minute. This is so out of the norm. This has to be important because, again, it is very rare you see an author use that device at all, using any kind of second person kind of voice. It is super rare, and when it's done, it's for a particular reason. So I think she did a really good job with that. I also love this. I feel like she was being great on my permanent record. Love it. Jemisin layers the world and answers we wonder about come to light as she unfolds the story. More is to come. I hope you all continue. I know. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to continue with this because, first of all, this is the first N.K. Jemisin book I've ever read. So to know that I started off with a really good series that I know a lot of people really enjoy was something I was looking forward to with this read along, and why I wanted to start off with it, because I knew this was one that a lot of people read, that, you know, had won so many awards, and I wanted to understand what the hype behind that was. Yeah. And then as we go on with the read along, reading some of the more obscure things or even the newer things that people really haven't touched on much, because I think a lot of people might be stuck on the more popular series, because and that's fine if you are, but I want to try everything, because if I like her writing style, I want to see what else she can do. So, okay, so let's move on to one of the biggest themes that I think was brought up in this, that I've also seen many people talk about when it comes to this series, and that is the theme about oppression in general. There is not really anything in terms of like a certain kind of event that sparked this idea, but obviously the oppressed people are the origins. They are the ones that, like many other fantasy stories, they're magic wielding, they're bad, they're evil, or they can be used and exploited. Usually goes hand in hand when it comes to a lot of fantasy. It's either one, the other, or both exist in the same world. In this case, we have both. They are feared, they are considered evil, they are considered, not, normal, and they are used and exploited for this world's purposes. And what I really enjoyed too was, because we had three perspectives, I believe we have three different ways in which oppression is seen. First of which, and this is purely my opinion, you don't have to agree with this at all, but this is what I gathered from thinking about this theme, is that Demaya was more of a look at outcasting people in general, the way that oppression kind of works. You have people that are outcasted, right? That's a type of oppression. You are saying this person is an other of some kind, they need to go somewhere else, or they need to, basically just not be with the rest of the world. And with Demaya, we saw that with how her family treated her. Once they found out she was an origin, into the barn, sent off to the fulcrum. Bye. The second one I thought was interesting was with Cyanite, where a lot of times with going into that idea of using for exploitation, she was manipulated and forced into a particular role that she thought was necessary, but it really was a ploy on the world and the political system to use her for their ends meet. And then when she saw what happened, she kind of was like, I've been a pawn this entire time. I've been being used this entire time for somebody else's purpose. And then the last one with Esun, I think that the idea of murdering people or unaliving people that are of a different idea is a very extreme form of oppression, because essentially, instead of just completely outcasting them, you just get rid of them entirely. for whatever reason because you find them different. And I thought that was just really interesting to see those three different levels of types of oppression that are brought up within each part of this character's life. Courtney, do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree. I think when it comes to, I feel like when it comes to Demaya and then when it comes to Esun, I feel like their oppression's kind of the same. And the idea of there's people that seek to harm them because they're different. But also, I feel like there was a bit of grace that was given to each of them in order for people that cared about them.
Right.
And so, like with her family, like I think the Guardian was saying that, your family could have killed you, but they put you in this barn and waited for me. So it was some grace in the idea of somebody cared about her. And when it comes to Esun, she had a young dude and also the mayor or whatever guy of the town that walked her out and allowed her to be able to leave. So I think that while they were oppressed, there was still somebody that had a little bit of sympathy for their situation within that. So it just shows that there are allies within that oppression. So I appreciated that. And then, yeah, I agree the same thing with you when it comes to Cyanide. She's basically being utilized for the fulcrums, like basically as the flunky there. But then you do have Alabaster, who is part of that oppression as well. And he's been around for a while. And that was one of the reasons why I had some sympathy for him, But I think also within that, I think he's probably been able to carve out some sort of knowledge to fight back in there too. So
oh yeah, for sure. I would be surprised if he hadn't, because it seems like even from kind of the first instance that we see Alabaster, right? He understands that he's a pawn in some capacity, but he doesn't feel like he has a way out. And so that's probably why he's become so jaded, part of it. Like he's seen a lot, he's gone through a lot. And while he can't stop a lot of what's happening, he tries to figure out a way to do that. And I think that that's part of what he wants to do with Cyanide. And then when things go to hell, he has to completely regroup. And then I'm sure that he thought Cyanide was just as dead as she thought him. And so, trying to figure out what to do past that, like then meeting up for the first time in a long time, probably going on like 10, 15 years, maybe. I'm just guessing on the time frame. Like when they finally get back together and see each other, it's like, we can make something happen. She's getting into her power even more than she was when we were together. What can I do with this? But also, what can I do for her to get her on my side? Like, how can I help her and then also help myself? But I just really appreciate how each of these, like just like you said, Demaya and Esun seem to have very similar forms of oppression going on. I think it's interesting how there's kind of two levels of the extreme, because just like you said, Demaya was told by the Guardian, your parents could have killed you, but instead they just ostracized you, waited for me to come by. And then you have Esun's husband, who completely kills his own child. It's so very different, but it all comes back to this idea of nobody wants these people around. Nobody wants the origins in this world. I just really appreciate that that's brought up, because it's a very important topic, especially as a person of color writing this story, talking about, the different oppressive things that they might have gone through that can then reach other people in ways that they can apply to the real world.
I think people react out of fear in different ways. And I think oppression and making other people feel less than is one prime thing that they do. But I also felt like when it comes to the fulcrum, right? So part of the oppression is making the origins go to the fulcrum. Hey, we're segregating you from society. You're going to this organization, right? What I thought was interesting is, okay, you already know they have this energy magic. That's what I call it, right? You have this energy magic, which is really powerful. I think it's really interesting that you're concentrating that in this one area. So it's the idea that you fear these people, but you're going to throw them all here. What if they decided we're going to have a revolt? Now, I know you have the guardians that kind of put them in check within reason, but from my understanding, I think you have more origins than guardians. So it's the idea of, if you want to have this revolt, and they actually got it together and banded together, then that's not really a good idea to put them all together in one area and say, this is where you're going to be at.
I am so glad you said that, because I was thinking that myself. I'm like, what is the purpose of putting all of these people in the same place?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how they talk about in the fulcrum, there are also issues. Is that something to do with what Alabaster did? Or is it because something actually happened there that we have yet to figure out exactly how all of that went down? And that is something I'm very interested to see, because especially if we get Essun and Alabaster together, did they have, like, obviously everything's supposed to happen the same day. So, something happened at the fulcrum, but so stuff's breaking down. But what are they going to do to actually break the hold? Are they going to get out all of these origins, and then what's going to happen from there? I think that's going to be super fun to see. Not far away from how the Jewish people were turned into the Nazi by their neighbors. Friends at one point turned them in to die. I can understand why they would kill children they feared. 100%. That was actually one of the things I do remember thinking of almost immediately. But I also thought about too, just in general, the history of, with slaves, right? If you didn't go to a house, like when you were traveling Underground Railroad, if you went to a house where somebody like wasn't gonna actually protect you, they'd send you right back, and you would be lucky if you weren't killed by the owner because of the fact that you ran. And you could, even if it wasn't shoot on sight, it was that you had bounties on your head, and people would be out looking for you constantly. And so it always makes me think of like, wow, this is something that in a lot of places still kind of happens, because we still have things like sex trafficking. We still have places where there's, child labor and sweatshops and all these things that I feel like really can still in a lot of ways play into this, not 100%, but can play into the fact that like there's still oppression that goes on every single day to some extent, anywhere in the world. And when people become afraid of somebody or something, it's all about them. They have to get rid of them. They have to, take care of them, get them away from everybody else, because something's not right about them in some capacity. Keeping them thinking they're alone so they don't work together. Yep. Book just sitting there looking at me. Writing can be difficult, so never made it to my TBR. I think that was one of the reasons I was so afraid at first, was I was a little intimidated, but I'm so glad I decided to start with this, because I think that I've slept on this way too long, and it's past due the time I read it. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to bring up the guardians as well. So they're also part of the oppression and the control, because I was trying to figure out, the guardians are the ones that control the fulcrum, right?
I believe so, to some extent, yes.
So you have the guardians that are basically utilizing the origins to make money, rent them out or whatever for different projects, but also to breed more origins and guardians for themselves. So I felt that they were a big part of that control and oppression too, because they can negate the origins' power.
Yep.
And so they were the first ones sent out. So I just thought that was also part of the oppression of not just outsiders and everybody else sticking the origins in the fulcrum, but also within that you have the guardians basically saying what they can and cannot do.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, again, going back to Jira's comment about, the concentration camps, right? You would have all of the Jewish people in the same area. They had a very set regimen of things that they could and couldn't do. And the second that they stepped out of line for any reason, it didn't matter. You could have stubbed your toe.
Yep.
Gone. And it's incredibly heartbreaking, but at the same time, I understand why this was brought up in this book, because this is how, to a very, mind you, extreme situation, this is something that could happen to any group of people that is looked at as different than everybody else.
People tend to hate what they don't understand and what
Exactly.
they can control. So it just comes out in that way. It's better to be able to control something that you don't understand than to try to tolerate it, and then you have to deal with it.
Exactly. And deal with the repercussions then from that. And I love how all of that was brought up within this. I think it's so, so interesting. For the same thing, and honestly, I didn't find it difficult. It just takes patience to allow for it to come together. 100%. I agree, Elise's. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about real quick is I would like everyone's opinion on what exactly is the fifth season. Is it completely an apocalypse? The world literally ending in its entirety? Or is it, like every cycle, a new beginning? Is there going to be change that comes from this fifth season? Or is it something that is actually going to be like, Armageddon, where everything just dies out? Because I think for a lot of people, this is a bit of a divisive kind of idea, but the rest of the books help understand what it actually is. What do you think?
I don't know. I was just thinking the fifth season is just right after the fracture. Because I feel like they say you go into a season after each I guess fracture is the term. And any major, cataclysmic event that happens, you go into it. So I was just thinking that the fifth season would be when they say this is the way the world ends for the last time. So I was just thinking that was once you to usher into the new era in whatever that is going to be. I don't know
Yeah, I
I
think
don't think I
it's
explained that right.
no, it's basically like you're thinking like it would be a new beginning of some kind. It would be the start of something else. Like it might be the end of one particular part of time, but then something else is going to come out of it. That kind of idea.
Yeah, and even if it's for people, because I feel like the world will always be here in one fashion or another. But I feel like the fifth season, like in the beginning, it says this is the way the world ends for the last time. Okay, but then also they're talking about, the world will always be here in one fashion or another. I'm trying to find that part in here. But even if people aren't here, then it's still, because they said a season is what, 6 months or more, and you have all these different seasons in the history, but in all of those you had people. But I'm thinking that if the world is ending the world as we as humans, the people in the book know it, then the fifth season is the final season, like the final way the world will be, whether people are there or not, which I'm assuming they probably aren't going to be.
Right. I think that's interesting. Yeah, because I think that it is, personally, I think that there's something that's going to come after. Like we talk about here in our world, right? You learn in science class that when the sun completely explodes in, a few billion years, that is when life on Earth is probably going to be dead. And the Earth itself is not going to really exist because of all the stuff that happens that when the sun explodes. But when it comes to society, when it comes to the eras, the epochs that there are in time, there's always some kind of event that ushers in a new millennia, ushers in a new era. Like you have to think like the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the Victorian era, the Industrial Revolution, all those kinds of things when you're looking at America specifically. But it's interesting how they almost make it seem like it's an apocalypse, but it very well could be. But it also very well could be only just the ending of an entire time of history where everything's going to get the big reset. More comes to light about the fulcrum in the next book. There's always something more. Yes.
It definitely has to be because remember when Demaya and Binoff went into that I call it the underground bunker in my head. But remember they went into that depression, which I think maybe the obelisks came. I think did they say the obelisk was made there or something?
Oh
That
gosh, I
that
can't remember
that in
exactly.
Jimenez, basically the fulcrum was built in Jimenez on that particular site.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know.
something
But yeah,
something to that effect. I
yeah.
can't quite remember off the top of my head.
So they definitely got
Um,
to say more.
think they're going to connect with the obelisk and end the seasons, either total destruction or a world where humans live with the aliens slash obelisk. The obelisk seems like they need help. Yes, I think especially in the second book, we're going to learn more about what that obelisk is and what
Yeah.
exactly it is intended for. Whether it's something to be destroyed or something that is supposed to help us. I think that's just going to be incredibly interesting. And Elise thinks that wonders if Essun is the obelisk, which
Hmm.
I don't know. Things
I
that we'll
think the
have to
Stone
answer in the next
Eaters
book.
have something to do with that because remember when she raised the obelisk from the ocean and she saw the Stone Eater inside of it? So maybe they control it somehow. I just know somehow their power because they don't really understand as much about like the origins. They just know it's kind of like a curse and whatever, but they don't really know like where they getting this energy from, like how
Mm-hmm.
are they able to, and then they know even less about the Stone Eaters. So they're probably some ancient civilization that I don't know. Maybe they made the obelisk. I don't know.
Who knows? I mean, we always wonder who made Stonehenge? Was it us? Did we
That's
make?
true.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear we made the pyramids, or the people at the time did, right? But humans made the pyramids. But like, who made Stonehenge? Who made the like everyone? It's funny. I always think of like the crop circles too. Who made the crop circles? Was it the aliens? Was it humans? I don't know. We're not going to find out right now. So, with that being said, Courtney, do you have anything else that you would like to touch on about the fifth season?
I liked the diversity of the characters. You had pretty much all these different races, and then you even had like the queer community in there too. So I thought that was interesting. I did not put together that Bine Off and oh my god, what's the name? What's the lady's name she put up? You know what I'm talking about? The
Yes.
person that she met later on. I have notes, but they're all over the place. Tonky. I did not realize Tonky and Binoff were the same. That I was like, what?
Yeah,
I thought we
that was a
was
shock
wrong.
too.
So that was pretty interesting. Let me see. I think that the Stone Eaters are probably the Origine's guardian because you saw how uh what's the person's name? I'm horrible with names, y'all. Acrimony, is that the name? What does that sing real bell to bell? The guardian that was over Alabaster in the beginning, or the Stone Eater that was with Alabaster, that he said this Stone Eater is pretty much, I've known them, for a while, and how he was very possessive of him in the end when Asun went to talk to him, and then Hoa was very possessive as well over Esun. So I think that there's some sort of guardians, and they probably work together.
I think so too. The Stone Eaters obviously have a much bigger role to play. There's something about them, just like like I said before, like the Koloss in Brandon Sanderson's work, in especially the Mistborn series. Like there's something more to them that we still have yet to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if also in the Obelisk Gate we're going to learn more about them, and in the sense that as we learn more about what the Obelisk is, are we going to see more of what the world is and how that all kind of came around? Just like you were saying, like how did the obelisk get built? Was it built by somebody? Were the Stone Eaters like a race from years before that kind of just got not wiped out, but maybe were hidden for years until they were found to be necessary? It's going to be interesting.
I think it's interesting that they saw the obelisk there and they were just like, oh, it's an ancient civilization, and just ignored it. Like, you see these things floating in the sky and you just leave them there and not even think anything of it. I thought that was interesting. And then I knew it when she was talking about when she was trying to get the coral from the bottom of the ocean and says something was there. I mean, it was like, there's an obelisk down there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I really enjoyed the relationship with, darn it, what's his name? The Moab guy.
Oh,
The what's I don't see it right written down. What's his
I'm
name?
I'm bad with names too. I'm trying to remember.
I wrote Fish Guy. I don't know why I wrote that, but that's definitely not his name. Antimony was the other name. Inon. So
Oh
I
yeah,
really enjoyed that little polyamory relationship there. That was kind of, I like a little sexy book. And it's been a minute since I read one. I was hoping NK would go a little bit in depth, but I knew she wasn't. So I was a bit disappointed in there, I ain't gonna lie. But but I thought their little relationship was really cool.
yeah, that really was. It was very sweet. I liked
Yes.
it.
um yes, and I really did feel for Alabaster when they were trying to decide. I did not expect the whole kind of three-way thing, like the fact that they would be sharing a person, but I thought it was really a testament to how much the relationship between Alabaster and Essoon had grown, because first
Mhm.
they did not like each other, but I think they slowly became friends. And because they didn't still do each other, but they were okay with each other. And I think they really became really good friends by the end. So it was just one of those slow rolls with them. But the fact that she was willing to give up Inan to him, I thought was really, really special. And when he was like, I wish I could say I would return the favor, when she was saying, you want me to go get him? And he said, it's just been so long. Like my heart just broke when he said it's been so long, because you can just see he was just kind of, I don't know if I would say hiding from himself and his sexuality, but he was putting it on hold for the sake of his job. So the fact that he was willing to be selfish in that moment for affection that he had been lacking for such a long period of time just broke my heart.
Yeah, that really hit me hard too because I know, how it already feels to like, cuz those of you that don't know, I am pansexual and it took me a very long time to figure that out myself. But when I first remember like trying to like figure out what my sexuality was, it felt so difficult to admit that I liked both females and males and any person really that like I just felt a connection with. It felt like I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't have that to some extent because, I was in a committed relationship. And yes, I never stepped out on my husband or anything, but the thing is that like I appreciate how not only was it something that was brought up about Alabaster and just that kind of like worry about not only like how he wouldn't be able to handle it with his situation, but then also how everybody else would kind of view it in some way. Because he also, we have to think, was supposed to create more progeny. So I can only assume that being with another male person would be super looked down upon, especially from those that are higher up because he's supposed to create more of these very powerful progeny. And that had to have been very, very difficult and was probably another reason why he didn't like cyanide at first because he's like, oh, great. Another person I'm going to have to try to, screw around with to be able to make kids. I'm sick of this. Like, I'd like to have my own, thing.
I don't know if I'm daft, but I did not pick up that she was assigned to go screw him till she said, I'm here to F you. And I was like, hold up. Where did that come from? I mean, were there clues? Like, I know the one chick was like, oh, I have 6 kids, but that went over my head. I
It's
was like,
okay.
hold on, why is she screwing him now?
Yeah, it's okay. No, yeah,
Then she pulls out lube. I'm sorry. I was just like, what is going on? What am I reading? I thought it was about to take a whole nother turn in this book.
Yeah, I will say I thought at first that like I felt the same. I was like, where did that come from? And then I read the section again and I was like, oh, wait a minute. that's why she said that. That's why she said something to the effect of like, I got 6 kids. Like, you're gonna do just fine. Like, what all that stuff. Like, I was like, oh, wait a
Yeah,
minute.
I just went way over. I don't know what I was thinking.
Um, I didn't get the impression that sexuality was an issue in this world. I feel it had more to do with his duty. He didn't want a connection with anyone. Cyanide created a connection. I would agree with this to some extent, but I do wonder if being tied in with his duty, there was an element of a sexuality thing that was just wasn't like maybe expressly stated. But I wonder if part of the reason he felt it was his duty to not have that kind of a connection or relationship was because he was being told he had to create progeny. I mean, I don't know, but that would be, I think, in some ways, a pretty logical assumption based on this world.
I mean, it could be that he didn't develop a connection with her until. I mean, I feel like he didn't develop a connection with her until, truthfully, they went to the island, and then they slowly started. Because by that time, duty was a wrap because they were already rogue by that time. But I feel like it was the idea that she was doing a duty too. So it's not like, oh, I actually like this guy. For one, he's half her age, but or she's half his age. But it's not like they were together because they liked each other. It's they were doing a service and a duty. Okay, here's the mandatory sex we have to have every day. Well, nobody really wants to be with somebody that is with them because it's their job. So you would have a bit of an attitude about that too. And not to mention he created all these kids all over town they made him create for his job that you don't even get to raise. You have a kid and then you just hand it off to someone else. So I think they both had a bit of apathy when it came to that. It was just duty and that's it.
Right.
But I did like that sexuality was like with them. I don't think it was a big deal because they seemed pretty fluid in Moab on the island. But then Binoff touched on the whole idea of being made to feel less than, like your sexuality is something wrong and an abomination with her story.
Obelisk has been there since the beginning of their world, so they wouldn't question it. Similar to the temperature here going to -7 degrees overnight, and only occasionally we accept it as normal.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Being gay would be frowned upon because he can't make a baby with the same sex individual. He's supposed to breed like cattle. Exactly. That's I think more of where sexuality would be frowned upon. The whole thing with polyamory being like, as long as there's a woman involved, I don't think it would be frowned upon, right? Because the whole idea of creating the progeny is that you have, somebody that can like actually carry a child. And so I wonder if they would be upset with it if he didn't have a kind of side piece, if you will, that he could actually get pregnant. If he just wanted to be with a man and that was it, somebody would be pissed about that. And I think that was more of like what my thought was in terms of the sexuality thing, why he didn't really play on it, didn't make a connection, because maybe he was actually more interested in men than women. I mean, I don't know. We haven't really expressly stated that or anything, but the way that he kind of, I think, went about all of it, and then understanding that he did have that connection later on, it all kind of made sense to me why he may feel as jaded as he does in some ways.
Yeah, I think NK just jumped in and out of his sexuality just to kind of present it when it came to that. But I think it was just fleshed out maybe a little bit more when it came to Binoff/Tonki. Which was interesting. Remember when she said she was all stinky, right? And then she took a bath and she was like, just in passing, oh, and I think I saw a penis in there somewhere. And I'm like, hold up, what? That was just some things that just, and AK Jemisin just kind of throws out little things, and she's like in and out. And I'm like, hold up, let's go back to this. And she's already on to something else.
Right. And then there's this. Like, it did come out of nowhere because we were in Demaya's perspective for so long. And then all of a sudden, making babies, gonna have to screw this person. And I just like, okay, hold on. Like, I actually had to back up a little bit at the beginning of that chapter. I was like, hold on a second. Where did that come from? Reason I say that is because she's literally said that no one would care about their polyamory during the 5-minute powder. Yeah, like, I think you're 100% right. It's not that they frown upon like you having feelings. It's more of the fact that like if you don't create progeny, that's where they have a problem.
Yeah.
And I think that was more of the issue maybe that Alabaster had, because he wanted an actual relationship with somebody that wasn't going to be involving just creating progeny for the sake of making it. Can't be wasting the seeds, so to speak. Plus, I got the feeling a connection to anything gave those over you the power to use that to harm or keep them in line. Yeah. Again, another good reason why he's probably jaded. He may have had some experiences with that in the past.
And I think he was able to let loose once they got to the island, because the duty was left. So he was actually able to just be a man and enjoy life, have his kid and be a father to it, because he wouldn't have been able to do that before, but also have a relationship that he cared about and somebody that cared about him. So on the island, I think it was just a whole, he was a whole nother person,
Yeah. I think she wrote Alabaster is bisexual. Remember, he said he was fooled into thinking one of the people he mated with actually loved him. Yeah. I didn't know whether or not that person that they mentioned was female or male. I don't remember if they ever mentioned it exactly.
I think it'll be female. He said the other females, it was like 10 of them, because they are there to mate for babies.
I thought so. And I that was my first thought. But again, I think, yes, he most definitely, at the very least, is bisexual. If not, like maybe pan or whatever the case may be. Because he has an attraction to some women at the very least, but he obviously had more of an attraction to the male character we met later. So he's on some kind of a spectrum there, which I appreciate.
I do like, though, that I keep going back to the island because I keep thinking about it. But in the island, though, I like that none of it mattered. Like the fact that they were gay, male, polyamory, whatever, it was okay. So it was like a whole nother society where that was fine for them. Whereas
it was kind of like an oasis of sorts.
Yes. And it didn't last. Of course, we knew that wouldn't last, but that was one of those things that I was sitting there thinking, this, is nice for the time period, but they're going to have to get back to reality for a few different reasons,
Mm-hmm. I say he definitely did. Demaya's perspective gave us a good long look at how they raised these kids to be in competition with each other. Yep. That island was a true vacation spot. Yes. 100%. That, like I said, I think it was kind of supposed to be that oasis moment for those characters. And like Courtney said, it wasn't meant to last and it wasn't going to last. But the moments that we had there were so beautiful. Like it did feel like that breath of fresh air for a second. And then that's when everything fell apart once again. And everything just kind of like spread out.
Although with Anon, did you get the feeling like, why does she want to be with him except the fact that he's hot? She kept talking about he was loud and, you can hear him all over the place. He just didn't sound to me like somebody that I would want to be with. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. It's probably one of those things where you just couldn't help but fall in love. Like, even if you hate all these little things about them, there's something that you just can't get over. And I think that might have been part of it, is that, she just was like, yeah, he's loud, he's annoying, all these things, but like, I still love him. I'm still falling in love with him for some reason.
I mean, they're still on the origin level too, though. She never found an origin that she actually can connect with. And I guess it's the like attracts like too. So,
yeah. I enjoyed what she said, that everyone on the island was a little salty and that she had the two most desired men on the island all to herself. Yep. What do you guys think about the villages and how society outside the fulcrum is set up? That is a wonderful question. I love it. So I think that this was interesting. It's very, very interesting to see that this is almost like futuristic, but it also doesn't feel like that. And I think that may have thrown a lot of people off when it came to the world building, because it didn't feel futuristic in the sense that technology was, the forefront of everything. But technology was still something there. And then you have the origins with the magic. You have the stone eaters that we meet. That's a whole other thing that we don't know much about, but maybe has something to do with magic, maybe has something to do with evolution. We don't really know. And It still felt like, though, there were a lot of areas that didn't feel super techy advanced areas. I think that that's really interesting, and I think would be a big reason as to why some people would be like, I don't know whether or not I like this because I can't quite tell what period of time I'm in.
I felt that the world was just as diverse as the people, because you had some really advanced populations, you had some
Yeah.
very rustic ones, and then when you got to the friggin' crystal underground layer, I was like, "Whoa, this place is pretty nice. I wouldn't mind trying to visit and figure it out." It was just
Yeah.
because they had people sleeping in tents, but then you had people sleeping in essentially glass houses too. So yeah, I
Right.
thought it was very diverse in that. But I that's part of the world building that I liked that she had in it. And while I didn't necessarily understand all of that, I appreciated it because to me it's not only just the world that she created like on paper that we're actually reading the story, but it's even in the back of the book, which I'm going to be honest, I did not even look to see that there were appendices till I started. And I was like, what in the world? I didn't, I didn't look in the back. But then I did, and I was like, she has time periods that explains. And to me, that is part of that world too. When she says, hey, this is part of the boiling season or whatever the season, you go back and she explains what that season was so you can get a reference for that. And that is also part of the world. It's a past world that is not part of the current that we're hearing, but it's still part of this world that she has created and is really fleshed out. I said that in my other video. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's besides the things that I think she's probably going to explain later on in the books for the story, but is really fleshed out for anything that you really want to know about, like the land and where they're at. You have it in here, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's very interesting too how a lot of the kind of expositional world building, if you will, is reserved for those that actually take an interest in it and find the appendices in the back of the book. Because to any normal, okay, in quotes here, normal reader, somebody that wouldn't know off the top of their head that there's going to be probably some kind of glossary or appendices in the back of a fantasy book, reading it by itself, you probably would be like, okay, I'm confused. I don't understand when this is supposed to be. But for those of us that are fantasy fans and usually know that those kinds of things are important and are either included or will be included at some point, it's easier for us to be like, okay, I see how this is, all together. I see how this is all working together. And the appendices are great. I mean, think of like any like maps, for instance. A lot of times maps are included because we need to understand the topography and the land masses that are involved in this world. And I appreciate that, a lot of fantasy authors will take the time to include some of that expository information because they can't always include everything, especially in the first book. There's definitely things that they can include in other books as they come to it, but it's really hard, I think, in a first fantasy novel of a series, mind you, like ever, like if this is a debut author we're talking about, to include every single piece of lore. Like there's a reason why there are so many fantasy series that have so many installments, because there's so much to talk about in terms of the past and what's going on in the present. I think that was really interesting to see in the fact that, like, not only does she provide the time period, but then also like information about all of the different aspects of the society itself.
And then also you're not confused if you don't read all of
Yeah.
that too. So I like that because you can get as engrossed into this world as you can or just concentrate on what's currently there. So I like that too.
Yeah, and I think that that is also probably why it was so approachable for a lot of people. And again, why it probably won all those awards because, again, for us fantasy readers that read a lot of stuff like that, we can see the appendices and find the value in them. And the new readers could be like, "Oh, that helps me understand this." But then brand new readers, like, they might get confused, but they're like, "Huh, this is still pretty enjoyable. I think that this is something I'd be interested in looking further into with other books." She's having sex with someone she wasn't attracted to, so her sexual experience with someone who actually pleasures her must have been intense. Oh, I can only imagine.
And then
Like,
they're all together, and that's even better.
woo! Yeah.
I wanted her to
Man.
go more in depth, but I understand that's not that type of book. But I was
Yeah.
lacking in that area, I will say.
I will say I was a little disappointed myself. I was like, come on. Like, I need something here.
Yeah.
But
I hope that there's some more romance in the subsequent books. Like I already see as soon and oh, what's the dude? It starts with the L. The young dude from the old community that kind of likes her.
yep.
I figure something may happen there, but I'm hoping there's some more romance and that's just not it, you know?
Yeah, I hope so too, because I got that same feeling. Like, even from the very beginning, I was like, oh, this might be somebody we might be interested in later on if they're still alive. Wasn't the person trapped in the obelisk a stone eater? Yes, that's what Courtney said earlier. I wonder if they came to this world to harvest stone and something went wrong.
Ooh,
I guess we'll have to find out.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. But you know how some people say the world is made of stone? Like, you ever heard that? We're made of rocks.
Yep.
So, yep.
I mean, we also have iron in our blood. We have to take iron supplements and stuff. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yep.
Love when maps, timelines, and even ancestral stuff are included. Yes. That is my stuff. That's my stuff. I love that stuff. What did you guys think of the structure of the Society of the Fulcrum? The structure of the society. Oh gosh. I mean, I think it was definitely interesting, but it also, not to say that like it felt the same as everything else, but it did feel familiar, right? You have people that are kind of like I said before, you know, you have the oppressed people, you have the people that are in charge, you know, there's something going on with that. But personally, I feel like that was one thing I still didn't feel like I got 100% clarity on, which again, we'll probably learn more about because we haven't quite seen everything in terms of Demaya's part of the experience. Like the hierarchy, the hierarchy of it. I feel like we still have so much to learn about that from like Demaya's side.
Yeah, I want to kind of see how the Guardians and Top Origins work together, or is it just the Guardians just dictating everything? Because you do have higher up people, but I felt like Alabaster still felt like he wasn't in control. Because remember, he said, I just got back and I'm being forced to leave again. And he's a 10 ringer. And then you had Cyan, who is a 5 ringer, right?
Something like that,
And then, or maybe I think she was a 4 ringer. And then the lady she was speaking to was a 5. But then where do you have in between? Like, we didn't encounter anybody in between. So I felt that was lacking.
And I feel like we didn't get enough clarity in terms of what exactly it took to go from one ring to another. Like, it seems that with Alabaster being a 10 ringer, obviously he's incredibly powerful. But like that's part of it probably is the amount of power that a person has, the amount of power they're able to control, that they're able to utilize, or maybe even it's their usefulness in terms of the type of power they have. But we don't really know much, if anything, about how exactly you go up the ranks. And then how exactly did the Guardians get their abilities? And why is it that they're the ones that are in charge? And what created them if they have some ability over the Origins?
Yeah, because they said there was a surgery. So apparently 2 Origins who have a kid that is not an Origin, with a surgery, that child now becomes a Guardian. And I'm like, okay, so where does that go into play? And then remember when the Guardian chef, I think, Damaya's Guardian, killed the other guy at the end, Timmy. So it's like, what was going on with that? Was he flipping out? So yes, definitely a lot that needs to come out when it comes to that. I think we'll learn a whole lot more.
Right. Who created the Fulcrum? You know, I those are things I feel like were, again, not fleshed out yet because we haven't gotten to that part, which I want to say is probably going to be something to do with the obelisk. There's got to be something involving that obelisk that nobody knows about, but only certain people do. And whoever is at there's always somebody at the top of everything. We just haven't figured out who that is yet. And I think that in the course of this second book, we're going to learn more about that, especially as Essun's story goes on, because I would be willing to bet if her daughter is still actually alive, she is somewhere involved in all of this. Yes. Because it feels like there would be no reason for her to be missing unless somehow, somewhere along the way, her husband did kill her. But if she's still alive, maybe she's somewhere involved in all of this.
And what was the reason? Did y'all think about this? Or what was the reason about why the father would have taken the daughter? Because I'm assuming he spared her if he took her away, but then beat down the son. I didn't get that. There has to be something special about her that maybe we don't know. Maybe there's something about female origins. Or I just thought of this. If she is... I was thinking that he could basically sell her because then she's a breeder, but I don't know. But it must be something special about her that he would have taken her.
Right. And that was Essun's question too, is like, why did he spare her but not the baby? Because I wonder too if it's, I think she even mentioned this at some point too, where she wondered if maybe her daughter didn't get the gene, the ability to have the power, because her son was able to showcase that at a very young age, and her daughter is older. So if her daughter wasn't showcasing that, I think that it was mentioned somewhere in there too, where her husband may have just been like, okay, you're the safe one, I'm taking you away. And that was like that's her hope, that maybe that's why he took her away and she's still alive somewhere. But I would be curious to know too, if she does have abilities, did they not come out yet? Is she going to have some kind of power? And if so, is it going to be something that could then be more powerful than Essun?
Never know. Or maybe he was playing favoritism, because remember, just like Demaya, instead of killing her, her family waited for the guardians to come to take her to the fulcrum. So maybe the husband was playing favoritism and was like, I'm going to take you to the fulcrum myself. So I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. That's part of the reason why Essun is going to try to find them, is so that she can figure out what the heck happened. Hopefully we figure that out more in the next one.
More questions, huh?
Which that is always to be expected with first books in any series. There are more questions than there are answers. But let's see how the Obelisk Gate is going to go, because with that, I'm going to move on to looking at one of the synopses that there is for the Obelisk Gate. All right. So one of the ones I have says, one second, my window got bigger. Says, this is the way the world ends for the last time. The season of endings grows darker as civilization fades into the long, cold night. Alabaster Tenring, madman, world crusher, savior, has returned with a mission to train his successor Essun and thus seal the fate of the stillness forever. It continues with a lost daughter found by the enemy. It continues with the obelisks and an ancient mystery converging on answers at last. The stillness is the wall which stands against the flow of tradition, the spark of hope long buried under the thickening ashfall, and it will not be broken. So, that says a lot. Just that synopsis says so much. We now know, based on that, we are going to see Alabaster training Essun, like we're hoping. We may see the daughter, the missing daughter, but who's the enemy? That's what I want to know. Who is this enemy that is being talked about? And then something else is going to continue breaking the entire world. And it has to do with the obelisk. So this is going to be, I think, a very interesting experience. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Courtney, do you have anything else that you want to bring up before we end off this live show today?
So this is the second book. If y'all are participating in For the Culture Readathon, this is a pink book. I just wanted to put that out there. I got to change my TBR. I completely forgot about even talking about this series when I filmed my stuff because I was still reading the other book. But I'm going to replace this since it's pink.
Yeah. Hey, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad that that ended up working out, even though it was kind of like last second kind of thing. You're just like, oh crap, I didn't realize that would work. Love that. All right, so thank you all so much for joining in. Thank you for all of the thoughts and the questions, and I am very excited to see how this goes. I was really looking forward to doing this. Thank you so much, Courtney, for joining me on this live show. I'm so happy to have been able to connect with you for this. For those of you, say it one more time, sorry.
Oh, I just said thank you for the invite.
Yeah, of course. And if anytime you want to join in on the rest of the live shows, you're more than welcome to. Anyone else also, like I said, if you would like to join in on the discussions for these, I would love to have some of you guys on. I think that this is going to be a really fun experience because you guys know this is a series, a read-along series I've been wanting to do for a while, and I'm so glad I get to be able to share this with all of you. Just some information before we go is that, as Oscar comes in. Hi, buddy. You gonna say hi to everyone before we go?
I think I'm going to reread this first chapter. Now that I got to the end where I was confused, I think I'm going to reread the first chapter.
Yeah. Well, hey, why not? But just some information for those of you that are still here. The live show for the Obelisk Gate, which is going to be the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy, is going to be Saturday, March 4th, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If that works for you and you do want to join in on the discussion, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at any time. I would love to be able to get more people involved in this. And I am excited to see how everyone feels, especially those of you that are reading this for the first time with me. And I can't wait. Thank you guys so much for joining in on this with me. I appreciate all of you guys so much. And with that, I think we're going to head off for the night. So thank you guys so much. And I will see all of you guys some other time. Bye, everyone.